Hi everyone, it's Stacey with my Learn to Sew series. Today we're going to be making a zipper pouch and it's going to be lined. And they're super easy to make. I know some people don't like to do zippers. They even avoid them because they think they're extra tricky. But trust me, they're not. Stick with me and I'll show you how. We're using a 9-inch zip for this project, and that means the zip starts here and ends here, and that measures 9 inches, but actually the totality of the zip measures 10.5 inches, and that's how wide we'll cut our fabric for today's project. And I'm telling you this because by knowing that, if you used a longer or a smaller zipper, just know that you cut your fabric to the length of the total zip. But today, please cut your outer fabric at 10.5 inches by 6 and your lining fabric at 10.5 inches by 6. And we need 2 pieces of both. We're going to start with one piece of our lining fabric facing us, so the right side of the fabric is facing us, and then we're going to take our zipper and we're going to place that on top with the right side facing us again, and we're going to line up the edge of the zipper with the edge of our fabric. And it can be a little bit tricky around here because this is quite clunky and it kind of puts you out of line a bit, but just do your best. And then once you think that's lined up the best you can line it up, what you can do is take a bit of painter's tape or masking tape and just carefully pop that down, which just helps keep it in place for when we're pinning it. Then we take the outer fabric and place that down with the right side of the fabric facing down, and then we line up those edges again. So we're lining up all the edges, and before I pin it, I'm just going to spin it around so that my pins are going the right way for when I'm sewing. Then I'm going to take some pins and pin it all in place, making sure my edges are all nicely lined up. Once you're happy all your edges are nicely lined up, let's sew. Before you begin sewing, make sure you attach your zipper foot, and if you're not sure how to change a foot on the sewing machine, you can check my other video on that. And now the zipper foot can be clipped onto your sewing machine, usually on the left or the right hand side. Let's use the left hand side. So I'm going to remove my foot that I've got on there, and then I'm going to pop this on, making sure I'm using that left hand side bar. And now we're ready to go. So now I'm going to stitch at stitch length 2.5, and we need to work out the best guide for us. We want to stitch nice and closely to the zipper, but we don't want to be obviously stitching too close to it. So you're going to have a little play to work out the best guide for you. For me, it's going to be the edge of my foot here. So I'm just going to put my foot down. I'm going to go forward a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to do a back stitch. And then I'm going to stitch all the way to the end, removing my pins as I come up to them, keeping an eye on my guide. Oh, something's caught here, so I'm just lifting up my foot and correcting it. Keeping an eye on my edge of my footer because that is my guide to get my nice straight stitch. Okay, so I can feel that I'm coming up to my zipper here, and it's too clunky to sew around. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause. I'm going to lift my foot up. I'm going to open it up, and I'm going to open up my zipper carefully past my foot and behind my sewing. So once I've done that, I'm just going to bring my fabric back down, making sure all those edges are still lined up, put my foot back down and carry on. Just make sure when you're adjusting, your needle always stays down. And then I'm going to go right to the edge, do a back stitch, and then we've finished that first piece. So now we can see we've sewn our first bit of fabric onto our zipper. Let's do the other side. So now we'll just close our zip and remove our tape. And then we'll close that up. So now we can see what one side looks like with our lining. And then what we're going to do is take our second piece of lining with the right side facing us. Then we're going to take our zipper and line up those edges again. We don't need to tape it this time because we've got this fabric sewed onto it, so it's helping it not be so movable. And then when that's all lined up nicely, we'll take our other outer piece of fabric with the right sides facing down. And then when we're happy that they're all lined up, we'll pin them. But what I will do is turn that around again so my pins are facing the right way. Okay, so once you're happy that all those edges are lined up again, now we'll just sew exactly the same way we just did. So I can feel that the zipper is right here this time, so I'm just going to open it up and just pull it down so that we're not starting with it right there. And then I'm just going to do exactly what I did last time. I'm going to line up my foot with exactly the same guide that I used last time. I'm going to stitch forward a couple of stitches, go back a couple, and then I'm going to stitch right to the very end, pausing when I come up to that zipper. Okay, so I can feel that zipper there again, so I'm making sure my needle is down, lifting up my foot, opening it up and just pushing that zipper closed. And now I'm good to go, putting my foot back down and carrying on. So I'm going to come right down to the very end and then do a back stitch and then go forward again, and then we're done with that bit. I'll cut my threads, and now what we could do is just quickly cut all the loose threads from where we began and stopped. I've just cut my loose threads off, and now I've got the lining on one side, you can see that, and I've got my outer fabric on the top here. And what we're going to do is just give that a quick press so that it's sitting really nicely, and we're just going to push these edges down so we're not having creases in there, and press it, being careful with the zip because it is nylon, so we don't want to melt it. And then I'm just going to turn that around and do this side. Just trying to pull it away from the zip there. And then I will just check what it's looking like on the inside. Again, pulling that fabric away from the zip so it's going to sit really nicely. And we'll do that on both sides. Okay, it's looking pretty cool. You can see how it's going to be a zipper pouch in no time. We've just got a little bit more work to do. Now I'm just going to do a top stitch so it sits nicer and it looks a little bit more professional. I am going to change my stitch length to 3 so it's a little bit longer, and I'm going to work out the best guide on my foot or sewing machine to get a nice straight line that's close to this folded edge here. So for me that's going to be the edge of my foot right here, and I'm going to start right at the beginning. And we don't need to worry about a back stitch because we will be stitching over this. So I'm just going to do this along the whole edge, and we can move that zip because it does sort of want to push our foot off out of the way. And then I'm going to just lift my foot up with my needle down and move my zip back, and then I'll carry on to the very end. And then I'm just going to stitch right off the edge there. Cut my threads, and you can see I've done that one side, I'll just do the other side now. And then I'm just coming up to the zip again, so I'll just lift my foot up with my needle down and just move it out of the way. And I'll just stitch right off the edge. I'll just cut those loose threads. Okay, now we're on the home stretch. So now we just need to open up the zip to make it easier for ourselves for when we've sewn it together to turn it right sides out. We take the two outer fabrics and place them together, opening it up and making sure the two lining fabrics are facing each other. Then what we need to do is come to the side here and make sure that the zipper is facing in towards the lining. We want to make sure it's sitting nicely there, facing in towards the lining, and all those edges are lined up. And once we're happy with that, we'll pin it. And then I'll come around to the other side, find my zipper, make sure I turn those zips in towards my lining, making sure the zipper is lined up, my edges are all lined up, and then I'll pin that too. And when I'm happy that's all done, I'm going to turn it over so I can see my pins, and then I'm going to line up everything else and pin it. So I'll line up my corners and my edges. And then you can add as many more pins as you feel comfortable to do or want to do. So for the lining, we do need to leave an opening. So what I will do is I'll place this pin in this way, so I know that's where I'll start sewing. And then I'll place another pin about here, so that's where I'll finish. So I'll sew it from this pin all the way around, and then I'll stop at this point. So I've changed my stitch length back down to 2.5, and I've worked out the best guide for me to be stitching at around a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm starting at the point where I know I want to begin sewing, and then I'm just going to lower my foot down, can remove my pin, I'll begin sewing, and I will do a back stitch because sometimes it can be pulled out of place when you're trying to turn it right side out. Okay, and then when I'm coming up to my corner, I'm just going to do my best guess at a 3/8 of an inch point to stop. So I'll make sure my needle's down, lift my foot up and turn. And then I'll keep going. So when I'm coming up to my zip, it can be very clunky, and you can just go extra slow at this point. Okay, so I'm coming up to my zip again, so I'm just going to go extra slow. And now I'm coming up to the pin where I know I want to stop, so I'll just sew right up to that and then back stitch again. And then cut my thread on the cutter. So when we've finished that, I'll just move my sewing machine out of the way. And what we'll do is we'll just trim these corners so they're not quite so bulky. Making sure you don't cut your stitches accidentally. And then what we need to do is, I like to just trim off some of the excess zipper here just to reduce the bulk. So just being extra careful not to cut your actual pouch. I just cut any of that excess zipper that I can get to. And then when we've done that, we're going to turn it right side out. So we just find our opening, put our hand in through, finding the opening in our zipper, grab a corner, hold on to it and pull it through, turning it all right sides out. And then what we can do is just give those corners a little push so that they're sitting nicely. I use a point turner just so they're sitting really nicely. Remember, you could use something else if you don't have a point turner, something blunt, and just make sure you're not too rough because you can accidentally push right through the fabric, causing a hole. So be gentle when you do that. Just get them all sitting really nicely. And then the last thing we're going to do is sew it shut. So making sure those edges are sitting in there nicely and you're getting a nice straight line along here, we are going to sew that shut. So I'm just going to pop a pin in right where we need to finish, so I'll know I'll sew just past where the pin's gone in here, and then I'll put another pin up the top, again where it's gone in, showing me where I'll start just ahead of that, and then I'll put an extra one in the middle just so it's nice and secure. And now I'm going to stitch that opening shut. So knowing where I want to start sewing, because that's where I put my pin in right here, and then working out your best guide, we just want to sew really close to the edges there because it's just to sew this gap shut. We'll just do a back stitch, working out our guide. I know what mine is. I'll just go forward a stitch or two, then I'm going to do a back stitch, and then I'll come forward, just closing that up. Now at this stage you might want to put your standard foot back on. It doesn't really matter, it just does hold it a bit more secure. And then we'll do a back stitch, and then we'll cut those threads. So now we've stitched our opening closed, what I'm going to do is push my lining inside my pouch and just give those corners a push so it's sitting nicely. And then what we can do is we can just push this out so it's sitting nicely that side. And then I'm just going to give it one last press, again rolling out these seams so they're sitting nicely. And doing the same to the sides. And then we can give the whole zipper pouch a little press if we'd like to. And then we've finished our zipper pouch with a lining. Isn't that cool? Okay everyone, now we've finished our zipper pouches. Now that wasn't so bad, was it? Remember, you can make them any size you want. Just remember to cut your width of your fabric the length of your zipper. And if you've enjoyed my video, I would really appreciate it if you would like, subscribe and leave a comment. It really helps me out. The instructions are in the description below. Just click on the link. And next week we'll be making a tote bag with a applique detail, and it's going to be so much fun. I can't wait to see you then. Thank you for watching my videos. If you're enjoying them, please like, subscribe and leave a comment.